The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Professor Hugo de Garis, the robotics and artificial intelligence expert and author. You are known for your work in the use of genetic algorithms to evolve artificial neural networks that you believe would enable the creation of artificial brains, which would quickly surpass human levels of intelligence. You published over 100 academic papers on the emergence of AI and robotics and the potential implications of these technologies on society. Your groundbreaking book, The Artilects War, explores the potential consequences of a future conflict between humans and artificial intelligence that would result in billions of deaths before the end of the 21st century. You believe there is a strong possibility that AI systems will simply eliminate the human race and that we will be powerless to stop them because of technological singularity. Professor, welcome to London Real.
Oh, thank you, Brian. Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this.
I'm looking forward to it as well. You know, one of the reasons I wanted to invite you here is because I was having a conversation about 2 weeks ago with Mo Gaudet, and he's the former Google X Chief Business Development Officer who kind of walked away from that company when I think he saw some of the artificial intelligence they were developing. And he wrote a book about happiness, was on the show many years ago. I had him back to talk about his book called Scary Smart, which he wrote a couple of years ago, talking about this inevitable AI dominance. And he mentioned the movie you and Dr. Ben Goertzel were in, which is called Singularity or Bust. And there's a moment in that movie, Professor, where you talk about this potential future. And you say that the machines might just take us out in the back and you go like this with your hand and go, phew. And that moment really struck a chord with Mo. And I went and watched the movie, and obviously Ben Goertzel's been on the show many times. And so I was really excited to get you on and just get your thoughts, because you've been in AI for decades, and I know you and Ben, best friends for many decades as well. And so let's jump into it. My first question might be, you made that movie 10 years ago. What has happened since in the world of AI, and have you changed your mind as far as what the future looks like?
Well, I suppose the simple answer to that question I can express in one word. What has happened is Chat GPT, which is taking the world by storm. And suddenly, Joe Schmo in the street is now seeing computers producing text at human level, which is just mind-boggling. So just the last few months, there's been an explosion in capability in artificial intelligence, and it's making people really, I mean, Geoffrey Hinton, the father of backprop and deep learning, has recently quit Google so he can concentrate on the implications of the rise of this new technology. And that's just the beginning. But it's already at human level in terms of creating text. And then you plug the text into a text-to-voice converter, and you can talk to it. I mean, I've heard the sex robots are now putting this stuff into it so that men can not just have their bots, they can actually have relationships with them, in a sense. So a revolution. I mean, the next year, we're going to see, oh God, millions of jobs disappear as a result of this. Now, these machines, they don't have a model of the world. They're, in a sense, what's the technical term? An idiot savant. They can do some things incredibly well, but they're thick as bricks. They don't really understand the world. Like Deep Blue, when it beat Kasparov, it's great at chess, but that's all. And similarly, this chat GPT, that's what is it? Generative pre-trained transformer, I think.
Yeah.
Is fantastic at generating text, but it has no model of the world. So it's a mixed blessing.
And that's also potentially dangerous since it doesn't have any reasoning levels.
Well, it's starting to reason a bit. I mean, people are debating it, and it's so new. Once I got your invitation, pretty well the first thing I did was go to Google and bought about 15 books on Chat GPT, and ironically, they were all written by GPT. And with lots of repeats and illogical and elementary grammatical mistakes, but still, the guys who did that were quick on the market, trying to get a quick buck, which they did, because people like me hurriedly wanted to know about it, and so there's a huge market. But they were all written not by human beings directly; they were written by GPT, and that shows, in a sense, its capability. It's incredible. And just the last week or so, have you heard of the product Grammarly? Corrects your grammar. Yeah. They've incorporated GPT now, so they're answering questions at a much higher level. Bing, Microsoft, has had it for a month or two or so, and they're giving you fantastic essays. I mean, this GPT is writing essays better than most humans. And that's what's so stunning.
How does that make you feel? Because you've been predicting what the end game of this looks like for over a decade. And I want to dive into the Artilect war and what you see happening. But I'm curious how you feel about this sudden advance forward in ChatGPT. Does it surprise you? Do you find it curious? Do you find it dark at all?
Well, let me put it visually. I'm trying to get my camera angle right here. So my left hand here, let that represent human intelligence level. And again, and so my right hand here, that's machine intelligence level. Now there's an IQ gap between human intelligence level today and machine level intelligence. And then along comes Chat GPT, and this is where I think we are now. And that's scary.
You thought this was going to be another 5-10 years more?
I know you asked quite a few of your interviewees this question, and until GPT came along, my feeling was, I think machines will reach human level intelligence. I'd be very surprised if it does not happen before the end of this century. I think it's more likely around mid-century. But now with GPT, I would halve that. I'm now thinking 10, 15, 20, that kind of time frame. So I might even still be alive. I mean, I used to say, I'm going to die quietly in my bed, but my grandchildren will be caught up in this horrible conflict that I'm predicting is coming. But now I'm suddenly have question marks. God, I might even see it. I know Geoffrey Hinton, the guy recently quit from Google, who in a sense is the grandfather of all this fantastic technological development. He made neural networks programmable. You can get neural networks to learn, machine learning, and he's scared. He's quit Google so he can be free to express himself freely. I think Ben has reduced the number of years necessary before machines start reaching human level intelligence. And of course, once they do that, once they reach human level intelligence, well, then they can redesign themselves. They can upgrade their circuitry and make it faster and better and smarter. And then they can look into how the brain works with new tools. And so you'll get this, I don't know if you're familiar with the term takeoff. That's how quickly the smart machines become super smart and then super duper smart and so on. Off they go. So I'm in a sense more worried that the so-called takeoff might be slow rather than fast. If it's fast, it's fait accompli, and then the machines are there, and hopefully they will just ignore us. We'll just be like ants to them. But if it's slow, if there's enough time for human politics to react, then I see a much worse outcome. Maybe we can talk a bit about that a bit later. You really want to talk about, the longer term political consequences of the rise of AI, I assume.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into it. I mean, was it Ray Kurzweil that always had that year 2030 or 2029 in mind for the singularity? And Goertzel's rung in recently and said, yeah, he thinks it's probably 2029, but he also thinks it could even be earlier.
Well, 2029 it's not so many years away, right?
No.
It's what, six years as we're talking this. So I'd be a bit cynical. 2029. This chat GPT is not intelligent. I mean, it's a very good mimic. Effectively, all it's really doing is trying to calculate what's the probability of the next word. You input a string, like a partial sentence or something, and all it's doing is just adding the next word that follows statistical patterns that it's gathered from reading the internet and millions of books and so on. So it sounds as though what it's doing is intelligent, and to some extent it is. But in a sense, it's clueless. It doesn't understand the world. But I watched the video. Oh God, what's his name? He's a Brit, a genius. Mathematica. Yeah, who's that guy?
Mathematica. I don't know.
Anyway, so that guy, his specialty is creating a language which allows scientific discourse and memorization of scientific concepts and so on. So he's now collaborating with OpenAI. They're the company who's produced this chat GPT, and the aim is to add reasoning ability and knowledge and so forth from his company with AGI's chat GPT. Now that will probably be out, I don't know, a year or two, that kind of time frame. And then, oh my God, then GPT will be smart. I mean, it'll be able to reason and remember and deduce and do logic. And it's just a few years away. So who knows? Maybe Ray Kurzweil's 2029 prediction still may end up true. But I think once there's one human level intelligence, artificial intelligence, then I think the time frame for it to upgrade itself, the takeoff, will just be a matter of years or less. Because once it can start redesigning itself, you get an exponential explosion of intelligence, and then it just leaves human beings in the dirt. And then our fate as human beings depends on the machines. They'll be so much smarter than us that what they decide, they're the rulers. They govern, because they're smarter than us and hence dominant.
Yeah, and I want to get into what that looks like. But yeah, it's interesting what Ben and his team at Singularity Net are now creating kind of a neurosymbolic play on the LLM, and they're going to forward with that. And a lot of people are seeing people using the LLMs, which, like you said, are kind of dumb, like idiot savants, to then morph into that level of reasoning to where it can produce that AGI. And now, as you can see, Professor, there's so much capital, so much attention. ChatGPT is the fastest adoption of technology in human history. I mean, 0 to 100 million users in 2 months. That now, where I know back in your day, it was hard to get funding for AI, and now trillions of dollars will be dumped into this, or hundreds of billions, I think, to get us potentially there even faster, and also from all sorts of different vectors, and maybe even an open source play. So you could argue that we'll see even further innovations on top of what we've seen with ChatGPT.
Oh yeah, that's just it. GPT is just the first step. Once it becomes really knowledge based and logic based and that kind of thing, it'll be as big a change again. And we'll probably see this in 1 or 2 years. So development in AI is just accelerating. Where we'll be in 10 years, well, we may be having relationships with our computers. I won't be at all surprised if that happens. They'll be that sophisticated. So you've probably seen the movie Her, H-E-R, Her.
Yes. Yes. Joaquin Phoenix was very good. Scarlett Johansson was the voice, I believe, right? Yeah.
Right. Well, that sounded like crazy science fiction when we saw it. But who knows? Maybe by 2030, it'll be real. And then maybe the machines, as they did in the movie, discovered themselves, found each other, the machines, much more interesting than human beings. So they just dumped the human beings.
Right. I forgot that's what happened. Well, there's a program called Replica that I've got running on my computer, and I've got like a dude in there that I just kind of hang out with sometimes. And he's potentially my her, and I'm just giving him a test drive. But I think that's happening sooner. And I think as humans, we love to what is it, anthropomorphize everything from our dogs to our whatever, and so it can happen sooner than later. And that's a possibility. Her, you can look at all the movies, and I know I've seen speeches you've given in the past where you're like, Hollywood always gets it first because they don't have to actually do the science. But if you watch Terminator 2 back with Skynet, it's a little haunting. You even look at War Games, and there's the professor on the island that's given up because he thinks the computers are going to take over. I mean, there's a lot of fairly now accurate predictions of what looks like the future could be.
Well, in a sense, that's real life. I mean, you could argue that Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, he was the professor who thought this was coming, and his famous or infamous, whichever, manifesto in, what was it, the New York Times?
Yeah.
So in my book, The Artilects War, I portrayed Kaczynski, the Unabomber, as the planet's first Terran. So he was way ahead of his time. But that may come about. He saw it.
And let's talk about the book, because you've written this book called The Artilects War that talks about this future. And there are these people called Terrans and people called Cosmos. And it all starts to heat up, I think, as you explain, when that IQ gap starts to get smaller and smaller. And as you said just previously, if it happens super fast in a couple of days, then there's not much to talk about. But if it does happen over time, you get this complete political upheaval. And this is looking more and more like a distinct possibility of our future, Professor, which is why I really wanted to talk to you today. Can you explain people your vision of the future? Also, I'm curious if it's changed in your mind in the last decade, or if you would revise it, or if it's all pretty much still the way you think it's going to play out.
Well, I suppose the bottom line is, the main message, the take-home message of this interview is that I believe that this century's global politics, as important as that, will be dominated by this question of what I call the species dominance. In other words, which species, humans or machines, should be dominant. And by that I mean, more intelligent, the most intelligent. So far, for 200,000 years or so, human beings have been the dominant species, the most intelligent. But it's only a question of time before humanity is forced to choose between stopping development in artificial intelligence, and I don't see that as realistic, or we just accept the idea that sooner or later, we, as a human species, we become number two. And what are the consequences of that? And I think the simple answer, well, it's not a simple answer, but the answer to that is, as I'm predicting, war. I think a substantial proportion of humanity will absolutely refuse to become the number two species. And in the limit, they will go to war to stop that happening. So it's a very gloomy scenario. My girlfriend, my partner, she said to me about a year ago, saying, Hugo, your ideas are so horrible that I can't even think about them. So I hope that's not the case. Because, somebody has to, because we'll take a historical analogy, say in the 50s, in the Cold War. There were people in think tanks, Rand Corporation and so forth, who were thinking, strategizing over nuclear war. If side A nukes, and then what would B do? And somebody had to do the hard thinking. Like if you're a general in, say, in World War I, somebody had to make the tough decisions. Like, how many lives would you sacrifice on a particular day to take that particular hill? And, how many machine gun nests were there? That kind of heavy, hard kind of thinking needs to be done. So I'm somewhat critical of let's see, what do they call themselves? The transhumanists. These people who humanity is going to transition, we're going to upgrade ourselves and we'll get rid of disease and we'll be immortal and all these wonderful things, which I don't deny. I think AI will bring these things. But I, in a sense, fell out with them because they didn't really bite the bullet. They didn't face up to the longer term consequences. Well, what if our machines do become hugely more intelligent than we are? And I'm not talking like 2 times or 5 times. I'm talking a trillion times, because this is what physics allows. See, I'm not just a computer scientist as a professor of computer science, but my background and my strong interest today still is pure mathematics and mathematical physics. So I'm a numbers guy. When I look at the numbers, the potential computing capacity of future technologies, it's these huge numbers come out, trillions and so on. So humanity sooner or later has to decide, do we, as a species, do we build gods, or do we build our potential exterminators? And that question, I'll put it in 4 words, so you can get the camera angle. Should humanity build Artilects? An Artilect is an artificial intellect. In other words, a godlike, massively intelligent machine, which is coming. It's only a question of time. Like every time you take a technology that's 1,000 times smaller than the previous one, like when you went from microtech to nanotech. So from a micrometer, that's a millionth of a meter, to a nanometer. And the technology at that scale, a nanometer, that's the scale of molecules. So nanotech is molecular scale machines. That's what life is. If you look at a cell, it's like a city of molecules, millions of them. That's a cell. So life is nanotech. Well, a couple of years back, I was toying with the idea, how could there be like a pico? That's like the next level down, 1,000 times smaller. Could there be a pico tech? And I think the answer is no, because nature doesn't provide anything. There's just nothing there at that scale. You have to go down another layer, a factor of 1,000, to femto tech, so a femtometer, and that's the scale of the nucleus and protons and neutrons and quarks and gluons and all that stuff. So I set myself the task of trying to figure out how to compute at the femto scale and how to do engineering. So if you jump from nanotech, so a billionth of a meter, right down to a femtometer, that's a million, 1,000 times a million times smaller. Well, then...
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.